everyone, and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod, Teacher's Edition. So, I would imagine that most of us who teach the Human Geography course would consider one of our primary goals to help students get ready for the AP exam. Problem is, a lot of times we feel maybe at a loss of what is the best way to go about helping students get ready. So, that's what we're going to cover today. Today we're going to cover what I consider to be some of the most important things in order to help students get ready for the Human Geography exam. Alright, so when we're talking about some of the most important things to help students get ready for the Human Geography exam, I came up kind of with a list of top 5 in terms of things that you should consider to help your students get ready for the exam. Number 1, just like with all things, we need to make sure that we plan. You need to make sure that you have planned into your calendar a set amount of time to prepare for the exam, in class, together in class. And so what I mean by that is not only do you need to make sure that you have set in your calendar a block of time to set aside to prepare for the exam, but you also need to make sure that you have within those particular days how is it that you are going to plan to prepare for the exam. So what I would recommend that you do is you have your block of time set aside. You need to think about how long do you need or how long do you want to take to cover each particular topic that you are going to be reviewing with your students. So if that means that you have 2 weeks, maybe you could take, if there are 7 units, you could take 2 days per. You could take 2 days per unit, potentially, to get ready for the exam. Again, I think I mentioned in a previous video that we have a lot of testing that's going on at the end of the year. So even though we have 2 weeks, I only see my students half the time. So really, for us, it's about an hour and a half per class period, and I can spend about maybe 1 day per unit. So I plan to cover 1 unit per day if we have enough time for that. And then along with that, you really need to think about the things that your kids need help on. I might even recommend not covering every single unit if you don't have enough time. Go back, look at your old test scores, see which particular sections of the exam or which particular units of the course your students did better on and which ones they didn't do as well on. And then spend more time on those particular units than the others. Also remember, Unit 1 of the exam, Unit 1 of the course is only maybe, I think it's less than 10% of the actual exam. So the information found in there isn't going to be found as often on the exam. So you want to make sure that you keep those things in mind. And then also, one of the things that I would recommend is that you make sure that you save time for personalized review. And what I mean by that is, you probably need to have a block of time set aside where you are doing some direct review with the kids. You're leading the review and whatnot. And then you need to have a block of time set aside where the kids are able to spend time on their own reviewing. Okay, they can either be reviewing with a friend, they can be reviewing on their own by themselves. Because really, the one thing I really try to ingrain in my kids as we go throughout the year is that they themselves typically know how to study best for themselves. And we know that not every kid's study method is going to be exactly the same. And so as long as they're being productive, as long as they're using a study method that is beneficial for them, then I let them go about that personalized review. If there's issues, then we can redirect them, things like that. But I really feel like it's important that you allow kids time for personalized review. Number 2, you need to make sure that you are not the one doing all of the work. One of the things I try to instill in my kids very early on in the year is that they have to take responsibility for their own personal study habits and for their own personal work. Too often times I think what happens is because we as teachers want the kids to do really well on the test, we want them to do really well in the course, we take on a lot of the burden for ourselves to make sure that the kids get the information that they need or that they're studying or we are reviewing with them properly. Now, certainly that is part of what we need to do, but we need to make sure that the students feel some responsibility for the review that they're going to be doing. And so you need to make sure that they're doing some of the work. I always encourage students to come in whenever we are starting review for the test. I always encourage the students to come in initially. At the very beginning of class, what we do is we start off with questions. They know that we are studying Unit 2 one particular day, so I start off the class with questions. Okay, do you have any questions over specific topics for Unit 2? And then I will address those specific questions, and then we'll move on into whatever other review things that we have for that particular day. But you really need to make sure that you put the emphasis on them to make sure that they are the ones that are responsible for their review. Number 3, it's really important that you use review questions. In fact, I've actually read articles on this, and really the science shows that one of the best ways for people to review for something to make sure that they are actually familiar with the topic is to use practice questions. So you need to do whatever you can to find different practice questions for your kids. So whether that's from review books, whether you're going back to old exams, make sure that you're not releasing any of that information online, make copies for the class, hand it out in class. And then you allow students to not only see the types of questions that they're going to find on the AP exam, but then the kids get the opportunity to see which areas they themselves need to make sure that they are that they themselves need to kind of improve in the most. And that kind of goes back to what we're having in terms of the previous conversation in terms of personalized forms of review. So there's lots of things out there. We know that there are the review books. You can use Kahoot. That seems to be kind of popular, at least it has been for the last couple of years. There's the app, the iScore 5 app. And with something like Kahoot, one thing that I might recommend if you're going to do that as a whole class, don't make all of your own Kahoots. Go find other teachers' Kahoots, obviously, because you don't want to have to do all the work. But not only that, it's really good to see sometimes the perspective of another teacher, how they've worded a question, why they think some answers are right as opposed to others. And so what I found is in the years past, that allows you to create really good conversation, especially if you don't necessarily agree with the answer that the teacher's given. So oftentimes that'll happen. Not oftentimes, but it'll happen sometimes. The answer will come up. I don't necessarily think it's the right answer or the best answer, and I'll talk to the kids kind of through my thought process as far as why maybe another answer would have been best. And so that's an excellent way to have additional conversation. But whatever you can do to get practice questions, so that's practice multiple choice questions, as well as practice FRQs. Number 4. So the AP test is going to be unlike any other test that your kid or your student has taken throughout their academic career. Now, if you have older students, then certainly they've probably taken other AP classes before. But a lot of us that teach human geography have freshmen, so this is going to be their very first AP class that they've ever taken. And so it's really important to make sure that they are familiar with how the AP test works. So actually, as we go throughout the year, what I do with my kids is I time every single test. If you go based upon the times that they're given from the AP test that they're given at the end of the year, you get about 48 seconds per multiple choice question, and then you get 25 minutes per FRQ. So whenever we're doing either unit tests in class or we're doing practices for the AP exam, I will time all of those so that the students get a feel for how long they need for each multiple choice question. Oftentimes what students find is that they don't need as much time as they think they do, and so they're able to pace themselves a little bit better. They realize that they have time at the end of the test, and then they go back and they check their answer. But again, it gives the kids an opportunity to get a feel for how much time they need for each of those questions. And again, one of the things that I found is that, especially if they're anxious about the test, if you time them, then they are not as anxious. They don't rush through the test as quickly, and then they're able to take more time on the questions and think through the questions more clearly. The other thing, in order to help them get ready for the AP test, show them the old multiple choice questions that have been released, and also show them the old FRQs. Let them see what the FRQs look like straight from the College Board, not just the practice ones, but the ones that are coming from the College Board. Also show them those rubrics that are available on the College Board website. Let them know how their answers are going to be scored. Help them become more familiar with and comfortable with the FRQ process. And the other thing that I do is I actually show them the scores from students in the previous years, because oftentimes what students think, especially if they're younger, they think that they have to score 100% on every single question. Well, when you show them the average scores, which typically are, if it's a 7-point question, typically the average scores somewhere in the neighborhood between 1.5 and 2, they realize they don't necessarily have to do as well on the questions as they thought previously. So what I always tell my students to shoot for is you're looking for about 50% plus 1 of the available points. So if it's a 7-point question, you're looking for 4 points. And then you show them a 4-point FRQ and you tell them, and this is typically the conversation I'll have as well, you see this 4-point FRQ, can you do at least that? And a lot of the kids are really surprised at what a 4-point FRQ looks like, and they say, well, certainly I can do that. And so it helps them feel a little bit more confident, helps them feel more like that they are capable of answering those questions and doing so in a way that's going to get them a fair number of points. Number 5, don't start late. You absolutely cannot get off track with the course. You absolutely cannot wait until the very last minute to start reviewing, especially for newer teachers who have not taught the class before. You get caught up in a particular unit that you really like. You get behind the ball in terms of content. You can't do it. You have to set a deadline. You have to set a deadline for yourself. You have to keep that deadline, and you have to make sure that you have planned to have time for review for your kids. Again, if we're going to make sure that our kids are successful in the test, we have to be doing everything that we can to put our kids in a successful situation. Ideally, what I tell my students is that they themselves need to start reviewing around February or March. Now, this isn't hardcore reviewing. What this is they're pulling their notes back out from first semester. They're reviewing them maybe 15 to 20 minutes per night, going back over units 1 through 4, maybe from first semester. And then once we get to April or May, that's when they need to spend probably about 30 to 45 minutes a night reviewing for the exam. And then if they've been doing that for several months, once they get to exam time, they're going to be really familiar with the material. They're going to be able to utilize the review time at the end of the year much more successfully, and that's going to help them become much more successful on the test. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 things that I think you need to do in order to help students be successful in terms of preparation for the AP exam. Hopefully you found some of those to be helpful. If you think that there are some other things that we can include, feel free to write those in the comments below. I hope you guys have a great year, and good luck on the exam. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope to see you next time.